Hello children, it's your father. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to make red beans and rice. The rice is going to be a separate video so that you may use that more often. But overall we're doing red beans and rice, cornbread and rice. So let's get to it. All right, for the beans, normally you'd want to soak them overnight and it softens them up before you cook them, but now I'm going to do it quickly. The instructions are usually on the back of the bag, but right now we're rinsing the beans. That way, you know, most of the time, now that we're in modern times, you don't have a lot of junk in there, but back in the day you used to see things like little rocks or pebbles or, you know, gross looking beans. So this step is just to find the stuff that shouldn't be in there, rinse off any remaining dust or, you know, weird stuff that could be on the beans, and that's pretty much it. You rinse them, you sort them, and then we're going to do the quick soak method, which should have them ready to start cooking in about an hour. Alright, so this is a pot with about 6 or 8 cups of hot water, and I've got it on high heat, and I'm just going to bring it to a boil. Once it starts boiling, according to the directions, we are going to let it boil for 2 minutes and then take it off the heat and leave the lid on it for about an hour. So we got a little ways to go on this, so I will pause it for a sec. Alright, this is the kind of boil we're looking for, like a rolling boil. So we're going to set a 2-minute timer. See, that's how you set a timer. Isn't that cool? All right, so we're going to let this simmer, or actually a hard rolling boil for 2 minutes, and come right back. All right, my timer just went off. I'm going to turn off the fire. I'm going to cover this bad boy, and then slide it off the heat, so put it on the other side of the stove. And then we're going to leave it for an hour. Well, shit, that didn't work out right. All right, I'll have to just set a manual timer. So 12, 12, 12, loop 12 is when it should be good to go. Let's get to it. All right, first thing is we're going to chop up our Trinity. Since we're going Creole, the Trinity is bell peppers, celery, and onion. So it's always best to get all your chopping and all of that stuff done in advance. The French call it mise en place. So basically it's a place for everything, or place for your stuff, something like that. I don't know. I'm just pulling shit out of my ass. So I'm going to go ahead and cut up some vegetables. And I have my knife, and I'm honing it. And what this does is it just straightens out the blade. Because most of the time your knife isn't not sharp, it's just a little bent. So we're going to do some celery, green bell pepper, onion. Going to use half of it initially, and then put the other half of the vegetables in later on, so that you get kind of a more depth of flavor. So we're just going to cut the very ends off the celery. And you could actually use this stuff, but I'm going to be bougie and make it the good stuff. All right. I don't know how people on TV shows do this shit all the time. Maybe if I had better equipment. It was a kind of a pain to set up. My microphone's not working right, I don't think. Hopefully you can hear this part too. So right now I've got dog chicken in the oven. I've got bread over there, or at least some stuff fermenting. And then I'm doing the red beans and rice. So a lot of stuff going on while I'm on my lunch break from work. So I tried to cut these in kind of a uniform manner, and then keep your fingers tucked out of the way. I may link you a video that shows you how to do all this knife stuff, but I'm not very good at it. But basically the key is to cut the stuff and not yourself. So do a little rocking motion, and you try to keep your cut sizes consistent so that everything cooks at the same time, or that it is finished at the same time, because basically everything in the pot's going to be cooking. Whether it's finished or not is another story. And I'm not very, like I said, good at this. So by the end, my stuff is a little wonky. All right. Celery down. And like I said, we're going to save half of this for about halfway through the bean cook. All right, next up is onion. We're going to just cut the end off, cut it in half. Oh, I forgot my little, I was going to be all fancy and have a little discard bowl. I'll just have to toss it in a trash bag or produce bag. Let's see what I've been doing this week. A whole lot of nothing, pretty much. Did a little bit of cooking, but it was a beating coming back from moving you in on Monday. All right, so what I did is on the onion, you slice in this way, like 2 times, almost to the end of the root. And then you slice down in little tiny lines like that. We're going to try to get a decent little dice without a whole lot of work, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. All right, so same thing, try to cut it all in even pieces without shit falling apart and without losing any fingers. And usually mine looks better than this, but I don't know what's up. I'm messy. So anyways, didn't do a whole lot this week. Not even cleaning, really. Shit. See? I get distracted. I don't do what I'm supposed to do. So I forgot to cut my lines on this one. So anyway, haven't really done a whole lot of anything. Just hanging around the house. Your mama and I went swimming yesterday and hung out at the pool, and then came in the house and watched Big Brother. And then what else? Really a whole lot of nothing. People in Wiley have lost their minds about stuff. No one wants to be nice to people and think the worst about people's intentions. So hopefully people just stop being assholes. My optimism is waning though. So I just can only be responsible for what I do. So I still try to be nice to people and give people the benefit of the doubt. Up to a point. Some people I've written off entirely and they can go fuck themselves. But hopefully we have some positive things coming up soon. Oh yeah, that was one thing that we did is we have booked a trip to visit Evan in October, and Evan already knows this because your mama told him the other day. But we're staying at a Airbnb instead of a hotel. And I just realized that I'm doing all this conversation stuff, but and the intent in this part was for me to do like a fast forward video, like a hyperlapse of me chopping all this shit up. So I may have to do that in another part of the video since I've been doing all my talking in this part. But I figured this would be like a good way for me to fill you in on what's going on. Although then I'll have nothing to talk to you on the phone about. So maybe I'll have to just come up with different topics for the cooking videos versus the topics. God, this looks like shit. So yeah, sometimes you have to adapt and overcome. I think I'll try to do a better job. Well, actually, I don't think I'm gonna need this second bell pepper. So I'm just gonna, that one's already washed and I'll put up because that looks about right, right? Yeah. So, okay. All right, well, let me put up my trash and then I'll show you what we're doing as far as the beans situation. Because you can never talk about beans without it being a situation. Be back. I just realized that I went through all this trouble and didn't show you how to do the garlic. So I haven't even peeled these. You just kind of smash them on your board and take them out of their dried skins. It puts the lotion on its skin, or else it gets those again. So you take the garlic out of the skin. It's already mostly smashed, and then you just kind of finish the little job and just make sure you're keeping your fingers out of the way. And they sell the jarred garlic, but it just tastes so freaking weird. There's like a shit ton of preservatives in it, and it doesn't really taste all that good. So in this, I'm kind of going light. Normally, I bomb the shit out of my stuff with garlic, and I'm trying to be more subdued in what I'm putting in my stuff lately. All right, so there's my garlic, and now we'll move on to the beans. All right, so we have our soaked beans. Whether you've done this in an overnight soak or quick soak, same thing. In theory, when you rinse the beans, it kind of gets rid of the stuff that causes flatulence, gives you the toots. But that's, from my understanding, really not the case. What causes your gas situation is all the fiber in the beans. I've tried doing this without rinsing it because I thought you get more of the essence of the beans, but you really get just essence of trash. I mean, not literally, but it tastes a little more dirty if you haven't rinsed them. So I'm going to rinse my beans very well. This is just cool water. We're going to put our beans back in the same pan we had them soaked in. This is generally, you do 6 to 8 cups of water per pound of beans, but essentially I'm eyeballing it to get the same thing, and basically I want like about an inch or 2 over the beans. I'm actually going to be doing something a little different this time with the beans, or not different. I've done it before, but there's a couple of different schools of thought on making your beans thicker. So we'll talk about that as we get back into it. But I'm going to put my beans on and then start them boiling, and then we're going to sweat our vegetables and get them ready to put in the pot as well. All right, so we're going to get our vegetables going. And yeah. I'm just going to use a canola oil, a vegetable. Oh shit, that was like way too much. So actually, I only wanted a little bit of oil. Well, no, it's not as bad as I thought. So what I'm doing here is I have my Trinity plus the garlic, and I'm going to sweat them just a little bit to release a little more flavor prior to putting them into the pot with the beans. And like I said, I'm only going to do about half of the vegetables because we're going to cook the beans a couple of hours. And this way we have a little bit more texture and a little bit of a layer of the flavors once we put them in. And I haven't even acknowledged my dope Pillsbury Doughboy hat yet, have I? Peace. All right, so let's do about half of our onion, about half the bell pepper, and let's do about half of the celery. I got my dope new slotted spoon at Ace Mart. So I'm going to do this about over medium. I'm going to move my pot handle out of the way this way because it would have got hot over there. And then I'm just going to let this simmer down a bit. For what I'm looking for. I'm not trying to get a lot of color on them or brown them. I just wanted to sweat them out a little bit. So we're going to take this and add it to the beans, which are still on high right now. Do this very carefully. And then I'm going to keep this pan up on the stove because I'm going to use it a little later to make a roux. So earlier I had talked about there are two different ways of doing red beans. I tried making the roux-based version, the last batch I made, and it was really good. The other method is you take about a third or a half of the beans once you're done cooking them, and you mash them up and then put them back in the pot, and it thickens it up. And that's good, but then you're mashing up like a third of your beans. So for me, more beans, more power. So I go roux-based now. So we'll make a roux later. I'll show you how to do that. And then that's towards the end of the beans. So right now, we're just going to let this sucker get back up to a boil. We're going to put it on low and then let it simmer for about an hour or so before we touch it again. All right, there's one thing I did forget to mention. When I put the beans on boil or on simmer, you kind of leave the lid tipped to the side. And then I also put in a ham bone that I had in the freezer. What I would suggest for you guys who don't cook an entire ham, you can buy a ham hock at the store. Especially in Louisiana, it'll be easy to get. But it comes usually like in a little, you can buy a single one or it's like in a little small pack. And then just use one and freeze the other one, and then you have it in the future. So now the beans have been cooking a little over an hour. And I'm going to add the rest of the meat. In this case, it's going to be sausage that we're going to saute in the pan. That's actually why I kept the pan for this and for the roux later. So we're going to brown the meat. When you brown it, it basically adds additional flavor, caramelizes the proteins in the meat and makes it taste good. And then after we take the meat out, then we put the vegetables in that pan, and it gets all of the brown bits at the bottom. That's called fond. Evan knows what that is from Babish. But it loosens that up, and that gives you even more flavor. So we're going to cut, I've started cutting the sausage like into cubes, more or less, because that way it becomes more bite-sized, and you get more bang for your buck. So basically I just cut the link in half, cut it in half again. I'm using, it varies, you know, I basically get what's on sale and what's decent. Most recipes will tell you to use andouille sausage, and I really like the flavor of andouille, but usually like 8 out of 10 times I get it, there's like little bits of bone in it, and that really skeeves me out. So I don't get andouille most of the time. I usually get like Holmes pecan. In this case, this is actually like Zatarain's. This isn't the best stuff in the world, but it's pretty tasty, and it was on sale. So that's what I'm going to use, and I'm just going to cut it, like I said, into little chunks so that it's more of a bite-sized piece, and you get more surface area to brown. And then I'm just going to throw it, instead of dirtying up another prep dish, I'm just going to use my cool pan as my vessel, my meat vessel, if you want to call it that. I'm sure that's something you never thought you would hear your father say on video, that I'm loading up sausage in my meat vessel. So we're going to cut this up, throw it all in the pan, and then brown it, and then it'll be tasty. So I'm going to put this on the heat. I'm going to wash my hands first because I got meat on them. And then I'm going to move the camera. Excuse the messy house. It's a house, and a messy house. All right, so we got the pan going over like medium-high heat. I'll leave it like this for a little bit. This is what our beans are looking like right now. And once I put the rest of the stuff in, I'm going to take the ham bones out, or the ham hock out. And there wasn't a whole lot of meat left on it. Sometimes you get them, and there's a lot of meat you can pull off of it, and that's just bonus. This one was mostly just you get some flavor of the bone broth from the ham, and then also some of the gelatin in the bones helps thicken up the bean juice. So that's why if you can get a bone, it's best to have it in there and let it sit for a while. So this is the point where I'm taking out the ham bones. So I got a little tiny, not that much left on there. It's all right. And then we're going to add everything from the pot, or everything from the skillet and the meat into the beans. Now I'm going to move it over to, this is my normal pot location for big stuff, but because I had the saute stuff, I was using the other burner. So this is what it looks like now. It's still pretty vibrant and green with the new Trinity we put in here. Probably going to let this cook another 30 minutes or so before I do the roux. I used to cook beans like all day, and they just don't, it's not as good that way, in my opinion. Like 2.5 to 3 hours is a sweet spot from what I can see. But then when you reheat it the next day, it's like even better. So we're gonna let this simmer on low. The lid tilted off, and then we're just gonna let that sit for, like I said, another probably another 45 minutes to an hour, and then I'll start working on the roux. In the meantime, I'll clean my pan and get this ready to make the roux. All right, well, welcome to the roux lesson. Basically, a roux is a thickening agent. You use equal parts fat and flour. In this case, I'm using 4 tablespoons of butter. I need to go grab my 4 tablespoons of flour. I remember that 4 tablespoons of flour is a quarter cup. Usually with baking I would do, flour I would use baking rules and weigh it, but for a roux this is close enough. So 4 tablespoons of flour. And what we're going to do is melt this flour down, melt the butter down, add the flour, and then let it get dark. And the darker it is, sorry, I'm eating a piece of candy. Alright, I moved it up to like medium high to try to melt the butter a little faster. So now that it's getting close to that, I'm turning it to more like a medium low because I don't want to scorch the flour. You want it to brown. And I'm not sure if I'm making this up or not, but I think you want to wait until all of the water has evaporated off of the butter. I think that I learned that somewhere not too long ago, but I could also be totally making it up. So I don't think it's going to hurt anything to let the water cook off, and it may in fact again be the proper thing to do. Yeah, and my heat, I'm going to drop it down to more like a low right now because it's starting to take on some color faster than I want, and I really don't want browned butter. I just want to get rid of some of the water. And again, I think that the sign that all the water is cooked off is that these bubbles go away. So I'm gonna, like I said, keep the temp on low so that I don't end up burning the butter. Okay, it doesn't really seem to be popping anymore, so I'm going to start distributing my flour. And you want to do it evenly. You don't want it to get like in clumps. And that's a hard thing to not have happen, especially the first few times you make a roux. You want to, like I said, distribute it out so that you're not having to deal with a lot of lumps. Ain't nothing worse than a lumpy roux. And our beans are looking really nice too. They're pretty thick even without the roux in it. So what I'm thinking is I'm only going to add a little bit of the roux at a time. So that I don't make it too thick. You got to have the right thickness. Too thick is just as bad as, hell, it may be worse than too watery. At least watery, you can add extra cornbread to the beans and fix that deficit, but turn this down to low now. But if it's too thick, it's just unpleasant. Alright, so you'll see my roux is taking on some color. And I really probably should be a bit faster because some spots are getting browner than others. Yeah, when I just burnt the shit out of myself. So don't do that. That's pro tip number 1. Don't burn yourself with hot stuff because it's hot and it'll burn you and it hurts and it's not fun. But I literally can't do any cooking without getting a blister somewhere. Usually it's when I'm baking and I hit my forearm on something. And actually, I think my quarter cup was a little light. Usually your roux is a little bit I can't say doughier. I don't even know what term to use. Usually it's not as liquid as this. It's normally like a nice oozy consistency. Alright, and I alluded to this earlier but didn't finish it, or I may be editing it out because it was in a weird spot. But the darker the roux, the less thickening power it has. So usually you want to shoot for, you definitely want to at least get a light blonde on it to get rid of the flour taste, or the raw flour taste. I like to shoot for a peanut butter color like this. Like I said, it's normally not this liquid, but it is usually this color. So let's turn that off, and we're going to add a little bit to our beans. and then see what happens with it. Here, I'll scoop the beans over. Like I said, this is like my favorite burner, so I tend to favor it. All right, so I've got it on super low. Shit, I don't even need a whole lot of roux at all. I mean, I got pretty thick. So let's... And basically, I'm just kind of scooping out the peanut buttery part here. Like the thicker flour pieces, that's what I'm grabbing. Oh, yeah. The only problem with this burner, I may actually need to go back to the other one, is that it's like super powered. It is designed for like to be your turbocharged. All right, I'm gonna go with just maybe 2 teaspoons full again. And I want you to also notice something. We haven't seasoned this at all yet. We're almost at that point. Yeah, that's looking pretty close to... I don't even need the burner anymore. So that's looking... Oh no! So that's my face. All right. So that's looking pretty close to how I want it. So right now, I'm going to put a lid on it for like 5 minutes, I think. And then after that, I'm going to taste it and adjust the seasoning. All right, so it's been a few minutes. Oh. That cracks me up. All right, so it's been a couple of minutes on the beans. I was letting it cool down a little bit. So now we're going to taste it. So get you a clean spoon. Ew, gross. That one's not clean. Man. These are falling apart here. All right. So I don't want any of the meat. I just want some beans and some of the vegetables, and then give it a try. It's actually not bad, even not adding anything, but it definitely needs seasoning. So here we got Raging Cajun. This is my favorite, but it's actually super hot, so your mama doesn't like it. So I try to mix it up. This one's almost out, though. I know I'm going to need quite a bit, just due to the fact that there's been no seasoning at all. So that may be like a tablespoon and a half. Oh, there we go. Like either a tablespoon and a half to 2 tablespoons of your Cajun seasoning of choice. I mean, you could always put in your own stuff, you know, salt and garlic powder, but why reinvent the wheel? This Tony Chachere's and Raging Cajun are famous for a reason, and in every kitchen and household there. All right, so let's try it again. All right, yeah, that's like dead on, maybe even slightly over. So I think I'm good with what I put in there. Next, so maybe not be as aggressive as I am with the seasoning initially, but mine should mellow out after a couple of minutes. So I'm going to let it sit on the stove for a little while longer, and now will be the time that I make rice. I don't make it from scratch anymore. I mean, I make it from scratch, but I don't use a pot. I actually use my Instant Pot. It's like super easy. It's basically bulletproof, but I'm going to show you how to do it on the stove. I like to make extra rice for leftover fried rice, but I'll tell you that on the other video, so you'll get to hear it twice. All right. Well, so yeah, that's it. The beans are done. You're good to go after it's seasoned out well. I'm actually going to take half of this and just freeze it right off the bat. And then same with the cornbread. And that way, you know, sometime next week when we're busy, we just thaw out the beans and cornbread and we're good to go. But again, whatever you like, you can tweak it, customize it. And it's a good meal, good cheap meal that'll last for days. All right, well, I'll see you in the rice video. Bye. All right, children, here's the finished product. Colors are a little weird because of, I have no clue why it looks like that. It's the light, I think. Usually I would put something like a sliced up green onions or something green on there to make it look fresh, but that is what you get. It's pretty dang tasty. So that is red beans and rice. Oh, I forgot the cornbread, and the cornbread.